Grab your mead mug, staple on your bibs. It's Red Meat Wednesday. Tonight, Ron Paul is here to talk about the Nevada ranch controversy and his very own standoff with the IRS. We've got TV's Andy Levy and Ambassador John Bolton to sound off on a new Al-Qaeda video and pot legalization. Yes, John Bolton will talk pot. Plus, legendary funny man Dave Barry and Angel of Death Nick Gillespie. Grab your steak knives, people. This is The Independence. Hey there, I'm Matt Welch, editor-in-chief of Reason, along with Camille Foster from Free Think Media and our very, very special guest for the hour, Fox News contributor Jedediah Bila. Together we are The Independence. The country has been captivated for days at the standoff in Nevada between a ranch owner and the feds. The Bureau of Land Management, which basically owns the entire Desert West, has backed off prior threats of force to collect more than $1 million in grazing fees the agency says it's owed by Cliven Bundy. The stare-down has drawn supporters, sometimes armed, from both sides and ignited a larger battle over property rights and federal power. Joining us now is an old friend of the show who's been fighting for the federal government for decades, even while sometimes serving it. He is former Congressman and presidential candidate Ron Paul. Dr. Paul, thank you very much for coming back on the show.
You're welcome. Nice to be with you.
So tell us what you think about this standoff. I saw that you were saying on Fox News the other day that you're heartened by the prospect of more Americans standing up to abuse from the government, and then in the same breath you warned that it could lead to more Waco-like incidents. Right. Where are you on this right now?
Right. Well, I'm still concerned about what's happening, but you look for the victories when you can get them, and the victory is that when the people stand up, sometimes you can push the government back a little bit, and I saw that as a victory. Also, I'm a strong advocate for nonviolent demonstrations against abuse of government by government. And although there were a lot of guns there, no guns were fired, nobody was shot, nobody was hurt. So at least there's a temporary victory. It may be just a victory of a skirmish, but I'll tell you what, it was better than guns blaring and people being killed and the whole thing being settled that way. But I suspect the feds will be back because authoritarians are authoritarians and they don't want to give up their authority. So there's plenty of people there that are gunning to go after the Bundy family.
Did you, when you were in Congress, either yourself or with colleagues, do active work on trying to, I don't know, privatize some of the Mountain West of the United States? It's kind of appalling how much the United States government owns of Nevada and Arizona and Utah.
Yes, and I talked about it. We may have introduced legislation, but it was sort of an overwhelming task. Fortunately, I was from a state of Texas that didn't have the same problem. But no, I've looked into that and thought it was terrible. It would lead to trouble. But, you know, technically the answers can be found because traditionally from 1787 up until 1864, it was known to be when you became a state, the property went to the states and the federal government gave up on those properties. And then when Nevada came in, they changed the rules and they sort of followed that afterwards. So if Congress would reassert themselves, you know, these properties could be turned over to the states. But, you know, tradition now is such that, you know, the feds are in there strong, and the tradition now is everybody assumes that Fed is necessary. They have to be there to tell you how to manage land. But of course, if you look at Texas, Texas came into the Union with all private land, and we've done quite well with development and watching for natural resources. So I think it's a mess the way it is now, because when it's belonged to everybody, it doesn't belong to anybody.
Tragedy of the commons.
Yeah, the commons, everybody is it's up for grabs. So you have the ranchers, and you have the oil people and the gold people, the environmentalists, the bureaucrats, and maybe the solar farmers. Who knows what's going on there? So no, it's a mess. Private property ownership is the answer to many of our problems, and certainly would have been an answer to this problem. Hopefully this demonstration shows you can do things peacefully and bring about a debate. Hopefully the debate now says that the answer is private property ownership to avoid these kind of conflicts.
Well, Dr. Paul, circumstances being as they are, there has been a federal court ruling here in the case of Mr. Bundy. What is a good outcome here? What does that look like? Is it just the federal government stepping out of the situation altogether and kind of letting him do what he wants to do, or should something else happen?
Well, the ultimate best thing to do is get the feds out and reinstate the position of the Northwest Territories and say that when you bring a state into the Union, you turn over all the land of the states, which is a major undertaking. But in the meantime, it is a complex legal battle because there's no sharp definition of property ownership here. But right now, I want the federal government to stand down. I don't want them to abuse the power and come in, and a family that's been using that land with an understanding that they had de facto ownership or control of that land since 1870, that there should be some respect for that, instead of saying, well, we're going to throw you out and take your cows and shoot you if you don't behave. That's the worst way to do it.
Now, Dr. Paul, you're involved in a standoff of your own with the federal government over the IRS demanding that your nonprofit Campaign for Liberty disclose all your donors or face fines. Are you being treated differently than other 501c4s out there?
The best I can tell, yes, but not the only ones. You know, there was a court case way back in the 1950s with the NAACP in Alabama, I believe, and the Supreme Court ruled that you don't have to give up these names for privacy reasons. And there was another court case since then, and of course, people who understand privacy, we shouldn't have to. But the IRS regulation says, you know, you have to do this. Interestingly enough, they did this to us 2 years ago, and we wrote a legal opinion on why we shouldn't be fined and why we don't have to turn over these names, and they didn't bother us. They accepted that. They didn't fine us, and now they're coming back again. And somebody says, well, it's just a coincidence. Well, I don't quite buy into that after all the news we read about on the IRS. So yes, I think it is, but most people do not, have to file names. I imagine there are a few others who have been forced to, but as we all know, the IRS is a political tool. And it's been used against different groups. It's been used both by Republicans and Democrats over the years to deal with their enemies.
Dr. Paul, I'm wondering how far you're willing to go with this, how far you're willing to take this battle with the IRS.
Well, I hope just as far as we had to 2 years ago, write our piece and see if we can, and actually the accountant and the attorney feels like we really have a case, but what does that mean? Just because you have a case doesn't mean you're going to win. But as of now, we don't have the intention of sitting down and writing all those names down and giving to those people. So it can get very messy. But I guess we always hope for the best and hope that people will come around to accepting the way the law ought to be, and that we can rein in the IRS. The sentiment with the American people now are with us and with all the other people who have been abused by the IRS. And right now, you'd think the IRS would back down and be a little bit more polite, because some of the officials there are facing federal charges for the abuses that they have put on us. So I think it's a key battle. It's a very good argument for getting rid of the entire income tax system. That would be the best thing to do for a solution.
Dr. Paul, one last question. Last week, actually back on the 10th, at the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity website, a gentleman named Paul Craig Roberts wrote about the 9/11 and suggested that the United States government was somehow complicit in that attack. I know in the past you've spoken out forcefully and criticized folks who have spun such conspiracy theories. He actually did this on your website. Do you have anything to say about that, sir?
Well, it's just that people should have a right to express their viewpoints. If you read 99% of the article, it was a fantastic article. But that doesn't mean that.
Yeah, but that 1% is pretty nasty stuff, Dr. Paul.
I know, but that doesn't. That doesn't mean that I endorse what he says, obviously. So I think that's a little bit overkill with political correctness. People know my position. I've stated on national television enough times, but Paul Craig Roberts has some very good views on war and civil liberties, and he shouldn't be excluded because he takes this particular position. But that wasn't the thrust of the article. So I don't think that to me, it's the people who overly criticize something like that probably the ones who have the problem, because I don't think that I think most people realize exactly what my position is, and I think the government. See, the other reason of the confusion is I don't believe in government commissions. I don't believe government commissions ever get to the bottom of anything, whether it's an assassination committee or any type of commission they set up. They're set up to cover the government, to protect the government and make sure that nobody's guilty of anything. And I think that's where the confusion comes.
All right, Dr. Paul, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much. Next, a panel for the ages, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, and current Red Eye ne'er-do-well, Andy Levy. An odd duo for an odd time. Then, Nick Gillespie croaks Bloomberg, and legendary humorist Dave Barry drops by. This is The Independents.
One love. 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 One love.
Welcome back to The Independents. A disturbing new video has surfaced, apparently showing a huge group of suspected al-Qaeda members conducting a meeting out in the open. Reports are that the video was shot in Yemen, where al-Qaeda is known to be very active, and where the United States has been aggressively using covert, deadly strikes against suspected terrorists. So what does this tell us about terrorism and the twilight struggle against Islamic extremism? Let's bring in our party panel. Andy Levy is the co-host of Red Eye and a former lean, mean fighting machine. I don't know what that makes you now, but that's just where we are. And John Bolton is the former United States ambassador to the United Nations. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We'll start with the diplomat here. What is the significance of this video in your estimation, sir?
Well, it obviously shows we haven't been using our drone capabilities to good effect if al-Qaeda can have a public convention. I think it's a clear demonstration that the international terrorist threat remains extremely high. The Obama administration's own director of national intelligence testified to that effect about 2 months ago. The war on terror is far from over.
We've had 14 years to this. What have we done effectively in the war on terror?
I think we've killed a lot of terrorists. Look, we didn't start this war. We didn't ask for this war. We can't determine how long this war is going to go on. We can conduct it more effectively than we have in the past 5 years, and that means waging it more extensively where the terrorists really are. But the idea that just because a war goes on for a long time means that somehow it's our fault we haven't won, I think is ahistorical.
Andy, should we call it a war on terror? Do you think that is there a root problem in the kind of nomenclature of it all when we approach what al-Qaeda is doing in Yemen?
I don't think so, but are we sure that that's not from Coachella? Because I thought I recognized Jared Leto. I'm pretty sure. So
I didn't see any hacky sack.
Yeah, I don't really get this. My president told me al-Qaeda was on the run. And I liked my al-Qaeda on the run, and I wanted to keep my al-Qaeda on the run.
You're such a partisan.
And now,
You're such a partisan.
Now apparently they are not on the run. They're holding festivals.
Yeah.
So what's going on with this?
Camille, do you think that drones, if anything, have been counterproductive here? Do more drones equal more Coachella parties?
A possibility. I don't know that drone strikes on wedding parties, perhaps, or double tap strikes where you're almost certainly going to kill people who are not terrorists, who happen to be coming to help the injured, who in some cases might be children, and then having the program be sort of nebulously shrouded in secrecy. I'm not certain that actually helps to mitigate against this sort of thing happening. In fact, it could provide ammunition and recruiting propaganda. But there is something to be said here. I think part of the reason why folks have been critical of the drone program, of the NSA spying, et cetera, isn't merely because of the civil liberties concerns for the latter part of it. It's a question of the efficiency and effectiveness of these programs. Are we actually using these programs in a good way? And to the extent that they are secret programs, it's very hard to determine.
It's hard to judge.
Very hard.
At the end.
Go ahead.
I was just going to, is it possible that the reason these guys met is because Snowden outed all the NSA programs?
Seems unlikely to me.
Well, they know how hard it is for them to communicate now. They said now they're going back to using couriers.
Oh, so they're meeting in person, which makes them easier targets and makes...
Does it, though?
Unless they judge the United States doesn't know where they're going to be and wouldn't do anything about it in any case.
Yeah, I'm not...
Ask Vladimir Putin what a weak United States means to him when he's taking over another country.
And also what bad intelligence of his actions play out in the field. We have more foreign policy news to chew on. Senator Rand Paul, otherwise known as John Bolton's favorite president, presidential candidate and one of the leading candidates for GOP presidential nomination 2016. He's been all over the news this week as critics of his less interventionist foreign policy views have sharpened their knives about his fitness for the presidency. Today, Paul himself took to the pages of the Washington Post to clarify his beliefs in a piece titled "Foreign Policy is No Place for Red Lines." In it, the junior senator from Kentucky once again claimed affinity with the international approach of Ronald Reagan and concluded that, quote, "Foreign policy is complicated and doesn't fit neatly within a bumper sticker, headline, or tweet." What is your bumper sticker, headline, or tweet response to that, John Bolton?
You know, there's an old saying that says, better to remain silent and have all the world think you a fool than to open your mouth and prove it.
See, you know, as someone on the right, I read his stuff, and I don't really see why he's demonized. I don't see what's so controversial. I read his piece. He's talking about not laying all your cards out on the table, strategic ambiguity. You can keep all options out there, but keep war as your last resort. I feel like these are common sense things that a lot of people on the right can get behind. He's just been stigmatized and maybe associated with Ron Paul on a number of issues that they don't necessarily agree on. I just don't see what's controversial about what he's written.
Being incoherent is a problem. And that's what his op-ed was, and that's what the remark that originally provoked it was. He was asked about what to do about Iran's nuclear weapons program, and he couldn't quite get it out whether he really wants to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons or how he intends to do it or what he intends to say about it. Strategic ambiguity means not being clear what your methods are. But the lesson of certainly the Cold War, and I think the war on terrorism, is you should tell your adversaries exactly what is acceptable and unacceptable. Let them guess what you're going to do about it, but leave them in no doubt that if they act contrary to what you've said, they will pay a high price.
But that becomes a red line, doesn't it, Andy?
Well,
I mean, if you say this is not acceptable,
right,
and you're the United States, and you have the biggest, baddest military in the world, isn't that ultimately a red line?
I think I don't have a problem with red lines in foreign policy. The problem is phony red lines, which is what we've got now. If you say, if you do this, we're going to do, if you do X, we're going to do Y, and then they do X and you don't do Y, then you're in trouble. But I kind of agree with the ambassador here about this op-ed being a little incoherent. It was sort of, I'm not for containment of Iran, but I believe all options should be on the table, so I'm not for containment of Iran.
Yeah, here's the best quote. "I am also not for announcing that the United States should never contain Iran." I think it was a Charles Manson song.
Yeah.
Never Learn Not to Love.
And then he said, you know, I don't think I should say that I'm for containment or not for containment of Iran because Reagan. And that's
I think he threw in Ronald Reagan to appease.
Let's get to Ronald Reagan. I actually worked for Ronald Reagan, which distinguishes me on this panel, I think. He would be rolling over in his grave to hear Rand Paul praise him. Let's talk about Ronald Reagan, the real president. One of the most massive increases in defense spending in our history, which thank God we needed and which led to the demise ultimately of the Soviet Union, invading Grenada, aiding the Contras against the Sandinistas, bombing Libya.
Pulling out the Marines from Beirut?
Well, I think, look, that was clearly a mistake. One of the earliest mistakes in the war on terrorism, going in not knowing what we were doing. But if Rand Paul thinks that Ronald Reagan is his model, then it's not incoherence, it's fraud.
Let's leave it there for now. Panel, stand by. We'll have more with you next, including Ambassador Bolton's position on doobies. And I don't mean brothers. Although we should get there, too. Plus, humorist Dave Barry is here. And Nick Gillespie is ready to rant against Michael Bloomberg, whose latest claim is that he'll stroll straight into heaven, no questions asked. Stay tuned. Attorney General Eric Holder is making headlines this week by confessing his youthful experimentation with marijuana, which, fortunately for him, did not come with youthful experimentation in our nation's prison industrial complex. And more importantly, he updated his views on pot legalization in Colorado and Washington, about which he said he's cautiously optimistic about their new legal structures anyway. Holder also said, unfortunately, in my view, that the White House is not currently open to rescheduling marijuana away from the Schedule I class of basically hopelessly addictive, medically useless drugs. So, John Bolton, since you're often mouthed as a possible presidential candidate, do you want to get your youthful experimentation confession out of the way?
You know, I suppose I should be embarrassed to admit this, but I never smoked marijuana while I was in college.
Tells us everything.
Because it was so political.
There's a qualification.
Really?
In the late 1960s, in
You
the
said
late...
while you were in college.
or subsequently, but particularly in college, because it was a mark of the left. And I'm not saying I did this because I was particularly virtuous. I just wasn't going to give the lefties anything to pin on me.
Wow. So the country is moving in the direction of marijuana legalization. I think it's going to happen.
That, but
I think it is. I'm ready to declare defeat on your behalf. Where do you stand on the idea of not supporting prohibition anymore as a solution for marijuana?
No, I think it should remain illegal. I think it's a different drug than all my roommates and colleagues were smoking in the late 1960s. And I think it remains a gateway drug for use in getting into stronger drugs. So I don't think the case is made at this point at all.
Andy, tell me why John's wrong.
Well, for so many reasons, I don't even know where to start. But I think, first of all, the Attorney General needs to sit down with the head of DEA, who last time I checked, a Justice Department flowchart works for him, because she's going out there saying that people who voted to legalize weed in Colorado and Washington were duped. She's saying that the cartels are setting up now in Colorado and Washington. So they need to get their story straight, because I think they're part of the same organizational structure.
You would think.
So, yeah. But the other thing is, I love the phrase youthful experimentation. Like, experiments can run for years. Scientists, they do studies and they check with people 10 years later, 20 years later. So what is that? Youthful experimentation is such a dodge.
Jedediah, you have a reputation as a prohibitionist. Is that
The truth is,
honestly earned?
I'm on the fence on this issue. I'm not really sure where I stand, and I think he does make a good point where people like me are going to be looking at Colorado and looking at Washington and seeing how it all plays out. I don't think I'm going to be able to tell you where I stand on this until I see how it affects minors. Is usage going up or going down? What is this really doing in terms of cost and everything? I think people like me are looking at this and saying, let me see how it plays out, and then I'll form my final opinion on whether I think this is good for society.
That's actually borne out in polling data. People are changing their minds, and they're also kind of open to see what happens with these experiments. Okay, the nation's largest police department, the NYPD, has shut down its Muslim surveillance unit, which has long been the target of criticism from civil libertarians in the Muslim community. The squad, known as the Demographics Unit, conducted surveillance inside mosques, monitored student groups, kept logs of people going in and out of halal restaurants, and at least according to the Associated Press, which won a 2011 Pulitzer Prize for its reporting on the topic, never once produced a lead that prevented a terrorist plot.
Shocking.
Camille, you are steadfastly against it. You see no reason why such a unit should have existed?
No, this is categorically bad. Obviously placing an entire category of citizens under suspicion and surveillance because of who they happen to be or what they happen to believe is a really, really bad idea. Even the FBI has had negative things to say about this, and the fact that it almost certainly has strained relations with this particular community and the government. This is a really, really bad idea. And here again, we see a poor investment of resources where the efficacy of this program is also in question, in addition to its efficiency.
Jedediah and Andy, you both are having a nodding fight. So
yeah, I mean, you're spying on people with no reasonable cause or suspicion. They're infiltrating student groups. This sounds really crazy, and this sounds like a perfect way to marginalize Muslims in our society, many of whom are fighting against extremism and are on everyone else's side. Now you're telling them there's something wrong with them just because of who they are. Completely oppose this on every level.
Andy, wouldn't police in London wish they had more information from some of the mosques there before various terrorist attacks?
I'm sure they would, but the problem is that labelizing entire mosques...
Labelizing?
Whoa, did I say labelizing?
Yeah.
That's an awesome word. I love it.
I'm going to labelize marijuana before
You know what?
we're
I'm
done.
going to stick with it. Labelizing entire mosques as terrorism enterprises, noting every license plate, taking pictures of people coming in and out of a house of worship. This shouldn't be happening in America. If you have a lead, follow it up. But mass surveilling people because of their religion, I'm sorry, that is about as un-American as it gets.
COINTELPRO.
John Bolton, tell us we're all crazy.
Yeah, you are. This is a vast overstatement of what this unit was doing. And let's be clear, this is part of the problem of acting like terrorism is knocking over the corner Starbucks. The fact is, a lot of innocent people would be killed, maimed for life. We're just on the anniversary of the Boston Marathon. If we had had a little bit more surveillance of the mosque that the Tsarnaev brothers went to in Boston, maybe 3 people wouldn't have died and hundreds more have been killed.
Got to make the determination of which mosque you're going to take a look at.
Well, you don't know what this unit was really doing, because all you've read is what the New York Times and other highly reliable sources of information have said. I think it's certainly worth looking at very carefully. But when a society can't deal with reality, it's got a problem.
And I would just add to that, and thank you for it, that when society has no idea what people are doing with its money and enforcing the law, that is equally a problem. Okay, panel, thank you very much to both of you. Coming up, Dave Barry and the man in black, Nick Gillespie. First, millionaire former Enron advisor Paul Krugman stars in one of the most unintentionally hypocritical stories in the history of mankind. Meanwhile, Kate Upton is talking about her boobs. Topical Storm, next. Welcome back to The Independents. Kennedy's off spelunking for the Arkenstone, so it's left to us to guide you through the misty mountains of the Topical Storm. Topic number 1. There we go. Jimmy Kimmel strikes again. Either that or you won't believe this selfie of a dude filming himself in front of an upcoming train.
Wow, that guy kicked me in the head.
That boot apparently belonged to a train engineer. Is that real?
Looks real to me. Looks real, and it's kind of awesome. That's remarkable video.
This kid's parents need to have a long conversation with him about what not to do when you're near trains and with selfies. I'm just saying.
But that train was close.
The degree of difficulty on that kick is worth noting. I mean, that's pretty impressive stuff.
He had to get the angle right
Yeah.
with the train this way.
Yeah, and what would have happened if he got the angle wrong? Yeah.
Well, he kicked the kid onto the tracks. It could have been a disaster, but it wasn't.
Or did the engineer's foot was he on the train?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's pretty good.
See?
All right, topic number 2. Model Kate Upton, famous among certain work colleagues of mine for her generous and attractive bosom,
Kennedy.
has told the Sun newspaper in England that, quote, it would be so much easier if only she had smaller breasts, or maybe some clip-ons she could take on and off, like the tie I used to wear at the Pacific Movie Theater job in Lakewood, California. At some press time, however, Upton has ruled out a surgical solution to her social problems. Camille, what is your opinion on the story?
I think this is great. You know, this is a real victory for everyone, including Kate Upton. She is a remarkable woman who, through her Sports Illustrated pictorials and her cat daddying, has done a great amount for aerospace and the creative arts. And I applaud her. This is great.
Do you know what cat
Courageous.
daddying means?
No, I'm not sure I want to know, actually.
We may have the video of that as well. Perhaps we could run that a little later.
I think all women should love their bodies.
That's
I'm
right.
a very no to plastic surgery gal. Love your body, boobs, big, small. And men truly, the sexiest thing they find in a woman is confidence. And that, I know that's cliche,
Amen.
but ask any man, if you can work a room and work your own look, you got it made. So don't fix it, learn to love it.
I support all of that.
All right, do you know those annoying, topic number 3, do you know those annoying people who only live to give spoilers of TV shows you won't get around to watching for several years because maybe you have 2 jobs and a 5-year-old kid and don't have time for all this frivolous HBO crap and all the people on their Twitters talking about Game of Thrones? Do you know holes like that?
Can we talk about Game of Thrones now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Joffrey's dead.
It's the hand gestures, bro. Like, oh, look what I just did.
It's true. It had happened already.
Well, now Google has addressed these annoying spoil sports with an equally annoying tech fix. It's called the Silencer, and it's an extension in Google Chrome that allows you to block Twitter and Facebook content that contains keywords such as Joffrey got killed. Market solutions
No,
for you?
no comment. I mean, unless you want more spoilers, because I got them for you. Loaded for bear.
I like it, actually. I wish I could somehow, you ever really wish you could mute people in person? Like while they're talking, you should just be like,
We're not still
So this,
talking about
you
me,
know,
are we?
No, of course
Okay,
not.
'cause that would really
Of course
hurt me.
not.
The hallways of Fox would sound differently if we had that. Topic number 4. Income inequality is the defining economic issue of our time, so says a number of commentators and economists on the left, most notably the Nobel Prize winner Paul Krugman of the New York Times. Krugman's work on this has been so valuable that the City University of New York has offered him a non-teaching job at its graduate center dedicated to the study of income inequality, in which Krugman will be expected to, quote, play a modest role in public events and contribute to the buildup of a new inequality initiative. And the price for Krugman's labor, unintensive work, $25,000 per month.
I want to know what he's doing. I mean, he's not teaching. He's not supervising students. I want someone to log what this guy does every day and then tell me how to find a job like that.
He is perhaps the most expensive and exclusive and unattractive male escort on the planet.
All I got to say is Google image Paul Krugman in house. That's all I'm going to say.
Uh-oh.
Next up, legendary humorist Dave Barry is here. Is he on board with us wacko libertarians? We'll see. Then, Nick Gillespie unloads on perennial nanny state stick in the mud Michael Bloomberg. Stay tuned. Love, love, love. Welcome back to The Independents. Dave Barry is a Pulitzer Prize-winning humor writer and a New York Times best-selling author. He spent 3 decades as a great columnist at the Miami Herald, covering the sorts of random topics and body parts we do in our program's Topical Storm. And he's the first guest on our program to have a sewage pumping station named in his honor. Dave Barry, how the hell are you, man?
I'm good. Long time. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Last time I saw you, if I'm not mistaken, I suffered a wound that still bears a scar on my finger from a freak accident involving a beer can.
It was a beer can, and I assume you sued somebody.
Yeah, I think
it
it
looked
was
pretty
you.
bad to me.
You have a new book out. You Could Date Boys When You're 40. Dave Barry on parenting and other topics he knows very little about. I see that PJ O'Rourke, who was on our show recently, also has a very funny book about telling the rest of the world what this baby boomer wants. Are you guys just trying to take over the world and tell us what to do?
Yeah, well, we're the baby boomers, and so we're the first people to ever do anything, and we have to tell people about it. That's what we do.
Tell us about the Bieber plan. This is very important. On our show, we talk about Justin Bieber quite a lot.
Well, one of the things I did as a parent, I took my daughter to a Justin Bieber concert. This was last year when she loved Justin Bieber. Now she's 14 and she hates Justin Bieber. But when she loved him, I spent several $100,000 and took her to a Justin Bieber concert, which is the worst experience of my life. You're a band, Matt, and bands should hold still. Musicians should hold still, is my feeling.
Especially your band, let's be honest.
Well, we can't really move. That's but like Justin Bieber is like a track meet. He runs all over the stage and with dancers just running all the
running fast
time,
breaks,
which is to keep you from realizing that the music sucks. Not to sound like an old guy.
Ouch.
And it's very loud. The music is loud, but also the girls. The girls make this noise. You think they're happy because they're in the presence of Justin Bieber, but they make this noise like beavers are gnawing off their toes. They go, I love you, I love you. They sound sad.
So the more movement, the worse the music. And I take it the moonwalk was effectively all about Michael Jackson doing the bait and switch on us, right?
I have no idea what you mean by that, but yes.
There you go.
Dave, you are a very brave gentleman. You have approached the topic of what women want. So I want you to tell me, what do we want?
Well, I read 50 Shades of Grey in writing this book.
An expert then, for
You
sure.
started in the right place. That's good.
And here's what I'm giving away. Spoiler alert! I'm going to give away the plot of 50 Shades of Grey. But basically, this woman has a relationship with a 27-year-old hot billionaire who wants to tie her up and hit her. And 100 million women love this book. So I asked my wife, who had not read the book, do you secretly want me to tie you up and hit you? And she goes, no. So like of the 4 things, hot 27-year-old billionaire, tie you up and hit you. The only one I can do is the 4th one, and my wife doesn't want that. So I don't really know what women want. They want a hot billionaire, apparently.
Dave,
surprise.
You gave a great interview to Reason Magazine 20 years ago in which you expressed some skepticism about the ability of the government to create jobs by spending our money. With an additional 20 years of learned experience since then, have you come around to the government's point of view?
Oh, yeah. They're doing a great job of creating work for people. I mean, I don't necessarily mean jobs, but like I'll give you one example. When I go to see the doctor now, he spends the entire interview, or the session, like this. He's typing something. He's on his computer screen the whole time. And I always say, what is that? And they go, oh, it's federal government. We have to do this now. So you never actually get to talk to your doctor anymore. But he is learning typing skills thanks to the federal government.
All right, Dave Barry.
Which could help him when he leaves medicine and becomes something else, which they're all going to do.
Thank you very much, Dave Barry, and hope to come by next time you're up in New York. Please, you come to New York sometimes, I hope.
All right, I'll be there tomorrow. How about?
That's perfect. Dave Barry, thank you very much. Next, Mike Bloomberg says he'll immediately get into heaven when he dies because of his noble work telling the rest of us what we shouldn't do. Nick Gillespie is a former altar boy, or at least Eagle Scout, and the early betting here is that he won't agree with Bloomberg.
They say I don't give a damn, but the people in this
Welcome back to The Independence. I'm Matt Welch, sitting in for Kennedy. Nanny of the century, Michael Bloomberg, is making the media rounds this week, bragging that he plans to spend $50 million to push his persistently unpopular gun control agenda nationwide, specifically targeting the NRA. Bloomberg also dropped this doozy to the New York Times, talking about his wars on soda and smoking and other personal habits. Bloomberg reportedly said this with a grin, quote, "I am telling you, if there is a God, when I get to heaven, I'm not stopping to be interviewed. I'm heading straight in. I have earned my place in heaven. It's not even close." Wow. Reason TV editor-in-chief Nick Gillespie joins us now. Nick is a sensitive moralist and co-author of possibly the best book I've ever read, The Declaration of Independence. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Is Michael Bloomberg going to heaven without an interview?
Yeah, he ought to check his Dante, because in the Inferno, I'm pretty sure that politicians show up in circles 6 and 8, but he's not really getting to Paradiso anytime soon. I think the most interesting thing about the comments related to Bloomberg is that the nannyism, in the same New York Times story where he was talking about that, it was also talking about how the NYPD had a demographics unit that basically went around to Arab American and various types of Middle Eastern communities and would try and get information onto whether or not people there were trying to bomb different parts of New York. His nannyism is of a piece, and it starts with things like stop and frisk, and it ends with things like gun control, and in between are these ludicrous things about soda ban sizes. But it's all of a part, and it's all of a piece.
We talked about the demographics union, the delightfully named one, earlier in the show. What is the political category that he belongs to?
I think that Bloomberg is kind of the second coming of somebody like Teddy Roosevelt. He's progressive in the sense that he knows the one best way that everybody should live their lives, everybody should vote, everybody should run their business. And he's successful enough where he can surround himself with yes men and yes women who will tell him what he wants to hear. Yeah, that he's absolutely right. He has revealed truth. He's not dealing in mere politics.
Well, this isn't much of a question, but I mean, obviously, Nick, he's talking about spending $50 million to advance gun control policy. Seems like a really inept way to go after gun violence. Why not spend $50 million to combat, I don't know, the drug war, which is responsible for a hell of a lot of the gun violence?
Well, he's a genius at chasing after problems that have already been effectively licked. I mean, if you look back from 1992 to 2012, violent crime in America basically was cut in half. If you look at gun crime over that period, it went down by almost as much, or the use of guns in violent crimes. So the fact of the matter is that whatever the United States has been doing since the mid-90s has been working. And interestingly, what the U.S. has been doing is not increasing gun control, but rather liberalizing gun laws and allowing more people to carry more guns wherever they want to. That's not to say that there aren't real problems, but it's clear that allowing individual citizens to choose how and when and where to own or to carry guns has actually helped, or at least correlates with reduced violent crime.
Nick, he says here that he's going to target in particular women and mothers, and they generally, when you poll them, do support more gun regulation. I'm wondering if you think that angle will be successful for him.
I don't think so. When you look, even in the wake of various high-profile, mass shootings and things like that over the past few years, very few people in America want more gun control. This is a case where the American people, I think, have evolved past politics, and they understand that gun violence and criminal violence is much more prone to, because of things like Camille was saying, about the drug war and about other kind of systemic issues. It's not about whether or not somebody in particular owns a gun or guns are in circulation. It's bad people doing bad things. And the real question is, how do we minimize that, not how do we put people who are already law-abiding through more hoops when they purchase their guns legally.
All right, Nick, thanks very much.
Thanks.
Next, Bila brings it. Jedediah is going to tell us what she's learned this week on The Independence. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Independence. I'm Matt Welch, sitting in the captain's chair all this week so far for Kennedy. With our hostess off for the week, we brought in Jedediah Bila to round things out. Jedediah, you did a fantastic job, despite the fact that I can't pronounce your name. Thanks very much.
Pretty much how everyone pronounces my name, to be honest. I've heard it all, let's say that.
I can only imagine. Tell us, what have you learned?
I have learned so much. First off, I learned that Camille has and probably always will have a better wardrobe than I do. That goes without question, aviators included.
No, lies.
I learned that you and I have a mutual affection for Los Angeles. I didn't realize how much you knew about the history. I didn't know that you were from Los Angeles. I didn't know that. And oftentimes when I speak to people about LA, they kind of give me like a frown. You know, New Yorkers kind of say, oh, there's no culture there. And I happen to love it, not just for the weather, but when I go there, I'm in the zone. It's the place where I do most of my good writing. So I think that was awesome. Where do you
hang out in LA?
Oh, all over the place.
West Side,
I avoid Hollywood at all costs and celebrity and parties. I like to sort of sit out in Westwood and hide. But I love Los Angeles. And the other thing that was really great, I have to tell you guys about being here, is that, you know, I don't fit into a box, a Republican or a Democrat box. And I feel like this is the one show where it's really great to be an independent, to be able to sort of pick on both sides and commend both sides. And it's a really great home for someone like me who doesn't really fit into an ideological box on a lot of shows. And oftentimes I have Republicans and Democrats both looking at me like, well, pick a side. Well, my side is to pick on both of you. And I think that's a really good place to be. So I think that you both reminded me this week why I'm really happy being an independent and not fitting in that box.
It's funny to get some of our more partisan guests, like they get ready to be in the Fox clench. This actually happened with Bill Nye, the science guy. We had him on for a climate show, thought we were going to be talking about, all right, let's bring the science, but he just said in his brain, like, I'm going on Fox, and so I'm going to be with people who are like climate deniers or whatever. And then when he found out that we weren't, he didn't know how to talk like a normal human being about stuff. And I think a lot of partisans do that. They don't know how to have a conversation about policy that's not immediately tethered to what happens tomorrow.
Yeah, and the truth is the best television is when there's an element of surprise. So what I love about what you guys did this week is that I never really knew what were you going to say about any given issue. I could sort of guess, you know, maybe they'll go in this direction, but you and the guests that you chose really surprised me a lot and reminded me that that's good television, and that's also really challenging for commentators to really take a minute to think about who you are and what you stand for and what you value, and don't worry about, you know, saying what someone else might expect you to say.
All right, thank you very much, Jedediah.
Thank you.
Thanks to each of you at home for watching us tonight. Stossel's in the slot tomorrow night talking about Earth Day, and Friday we're back with Kennedy doing a special hour about the 7 deadly sins. Why does lust ruin the lives of so many famous people? Is greed good? Andy Levy, Dagan McDowell, Charles Payne, and others answer those questions Friday night at 9 p.m. at midnight. For Camille Foster and Jedediah Bila, I'm Matt Welch.
This is Lou Dobbs Tonight.